Good day everyone, this is Nemesis, and it's been quite a while since I published my last build. Therefore today we are going to take a look at the DPS Guardian. The Guardian is not my main class, therefore I don't claim to know everything there is to know about the Guardian, especially since the build that I will be showcasing today, I have never seen anyone use anything even remotely similar to what I'm using, but it is quite effective. So for this particular build, the testing process and the comparison process, especially the comparison process, was really long because I had to get a lot of feedback and information about how other Guardians have been doing DPS over the past year. It's not about coming up with something new after 1 year into the game, it's about coming up with something right. So as always, in this video we are going to take a look at the build overview, the weapons, the traits, the utilities, the gear and stats, the math and statistics behind the build damage rotation and playstyle, a demonstration of the overall build's capabilities, and some really long final notes. So feel free to come back to this table of content at any time during the video and choose a different area of interest. So when it comes to the build overview, this time I'm not going to do a comparison between different DPS builds because there aren't that many DPS builds out there, not too viable at least. So I'm just going to go through some of the important things that you need to know about the video, the build, and some of the strengths and weaknesses. So I'm going to address something that gets misunderstood quite a lot in most of my guides. All of my builds in general are designed to function in a pug environment, and I try to make them in such a way that you are not dependent on anyone. Therefore, if you have a pre-made group that might compensate certain aspects of your build, the build can change a little bit. You can attune it to increase a certain part of the build while decreasing another aspect of the build, because that particular aspect is going to get compensated by your team. So I never claim that my builds are the best in every single scenario. I'm just saying what should work in general for a person that is not necessarily part of an elitist guild. Second thing, I keep saying that and I will say it in every single one of my guides. There is no best build, there is no best damage build, there is only the best build at. And in that category, this particular build is designed to do the most amount of DPS a Guardian can put out while still surviving. To do that, because I'm sure that as soon as you hear DPS and Guardian, most of you will go like, you're too squishy if you do this, or you don't do enough damage if you go more tanky. But there's a solution, and I have found it. I have speculated for quite a while, but once I got the gear and I actually started implementing the theory craft I had, the results were quite spectacular. So under pros, you will have to write that this build has the highest possible DPS that the Guardian can put out. I haven't found a way to do more damage than with this build that I'm about to describe. Second thing, even though it might not show in the beginning, while you are fighting at range, and you will be fighting at really high range, you have quite high survivability, even though it might not seem that way. The third thing, because you're quite survivable at range and you are fighting at range, you have a really high DPS uptime, which means a lot, and we will talk more about that a bit later. Under weaknesses or cons, I would have to say that the build, without some minor modifications, the build is quite vulnerable to conditions. Even though if you're going to use a glass cannon, you might not be going in places that are abundant in conditions. Most of the fights you're going to get into require bursting, and it will be over quite soon. The second thing is that this build, as expected, is quite vulnerable to melee and close quarter fighting. If you get rushed in close quarters and you can't really make your escape on time, then you're not going to do so well, and it is to be expected. No DPS in any game is going to be the tank at the same time. There is no best tank and best DPS at the same time, because if you put a healer there, then everyone will play one class. So that's how it is. And the third weakness, it's sort of a meta weakness. Basically, not many people are going to understand what this build is. Not many have seen it, and a lot of people are going to have a hard time playing with you. as in they will not know how this build is supposed to be played, and they will do a lot of stupid stuff and put you in a really bad position, or you will get kicked from teams until this build gets popular. So I have to mention that, because it's going to get a bit complicated at times. I actually got kicked from some teams as well, so don't worry about it. They will get amazed once they see how much damage you can put up. Okay, so let's begin. First thing we are going to choose are the weapons. So when we take a look at the weapons, most people will think greatsword, because the first skill has cleave, quite a lot of damage, strikes not too slow, and can add might on the third attack. They are right, the greatsword is going to be part of this build. The second skill, Whirlwind Wrath, on a 10-second cooldown, does a lot of damage, and it's also combo finisher whirl. Third skill, Leap of Fate, leap at your foe on hit blind nearby enemies. So some blindness, combo finisher leap, and some damage. 15-second cooldown. Moving on, Symbol of Wrath, quite a bit of damage, retaliation, vulnerability, has a radius, is a combo field light, blah blah blah, not bad. And the last one, Binding Blade, throw blades at your foes causing damage over time. Bound foes can be pulled to you, the effect ends when a foe moves out of range. So we have our melee weapon, but if you are going to play a glass cannon that focus on really high damage, you don't really want to be just melee. You need to have an exit strategy, you need to have a way to continue doing damage while these skills are on cooldown, or while you have sustained too much damage yourself to be able to continue doing damage, and therefore your DPS uptime will go lower. So we need a range weapon. By the end of this video we are going to find out some really interesting things that might totally change the meta and how the DPS Guardian is perceived. As far as I've seen, 90% of people think that the greatsword is the main DPS weapon. Well, we are just going to have to put it to the test. Meanwhile, we are going to find ourselves a range weapon. So hammer is melee, mace is a tank weapon, and we have the scepter. Fire a slow moving orb at your foe, and as you can see has 1/4 casting time. That means you can cast the Orb of Wrath 4 times per second. Quite fast. That's really fast actually, and has a range of 1200. Once we get to the math and statistics, we are going to find out a lot of interesting stuff about these spells. The making of this build was quite complicated, even from a technical point of view, because so many tooltips are wrong. You just have to test everything, otherwise you simply cannot provide reliable information. That's just how it is. It's frustrating, but we'll get to that later. Second skill, Smite. Strike foes in the target area repeatedly. Number of impacts 16, damage 188. So you do a tooltip damage of 188 times 16. Also has a range of 1200. This is a really nice skill. It's in the title, so we are going to be working with this skill a lot. Also has a 6-second cooldown, so this is amazing. You guys will see. Chains of Light, immobilize, vulnerability, some damage also at range. So we fight at range and we keep our monsters there at range. This is for single target, of course. The offhand weapon for our secondary weapon set, which might not be secondary after all. So the obvious choice for a build that maximizes damage would be the high channeling skill and some AoE burning. The AoE burning is quite good. Also, if you notice, this skill has a secondary mode, so you activate it once and do AoE burning, which is quite a lot of burning, and can be thrown at 1200 range for quite a bit of damage. You guys will see just how much damage that is. So we have our weapons, we do a bit of vulnerability from 2 weapons, do a bit of burning. Most of our weapons will be doing burning regardless, because we have Virtue of Justice, which even if we don't activate is going to burn our enemies every few seconds. So if we are going to move on to the traits, we need to choose traits that directly amplify the playstyle that we have chosen so far with the weapons. And we chose the weapons so that we do the most possible damage, preferably at range, so we have high DPS uptime even though we are squishy, even though we invested in full offensive and we leave nothing for the defensive mode. We also know that we have vulnerability and burn. We take a look at Zeal. we have power and condition duration. We know that power is needed in a glass cannon build because it directly increases the damage you do with power type attacks, and most of these attacks are power type attacks. And we also have condition duration. Condition duration is in general useful in power type builds, in glass cannon type builds, because of the vulnerability. You have vulnerability which now lasts a bit longer on the target, but in our case this condition duration also increases the damage from burning, because burning doesn't stack in intensity, it stacks only in duration. So the zeal trait line is definitely for us. First minor skill, zeal at speed, create a symbol of wrath when you are struck below a health threshold. The threshold is 50% and the symbol of wrath is this one, which basically is the same as the one on the grade. Quite a useful minor trait. It adds a bit of damage, quite a bit of damage, because it can proc the burning from Virtue of Justice as well. Okay, moving on, Fiery Wrath. Increased damage done to burning foes. So now you see when burning comes into play. Moving on, symbols apply vulnerability to foes. So we have symbol of wrath and another symbol of wrath which now applies a bit more vulnerability. So this is a quite good minor trait. Moving on, scepter damage is increased. This is a pretty obvious choice since we will be using a scepter in our build. So now we do 10% more damage. So overall we do 20% more damage from these two traits. Increased damage of symbols, 10% more damage for symbols, and we know we have symbol of wrath and symbol of wrath. The build is starting to synergize with itself quite well. Last but definitely not least will be Kindled Zeal. Gain condition damage based on your power. 13% out of power is converted into condition damage. So this is a glass cannon build, and most times I always say that in a glass cannon build you don't go for condition damage, for condition type damage, for anything of the sorts unless you do a hybrid. The Guardian is sort of an exception. It's quite different. Unlike other classes, with the Guardian there's no way to do only power type damage because of Virtue of Justice, but at the same time you cannot really do a lot of condition damage. You cannot really use a wide spectrum of conditions that do damage. You have burning and that's about it, and the burning itself is a hard ticking condition, doesn't last long, doesn't stack in intensity, just adds a bit of DPS. So you might want to have a bit of condition damage to boost the burning that is already there and there's no way to get around it. Besides, the burning is helping us increase our direct damage, so the burning is there anyway, might as well make it a little bit stronger. Moving on, we take a look at Radiance and we have precision and condition damage. So we have condition damage from here, condition damage from here. The message, what are you doing? This is not a glass cannon build, what is going on? The precision, aka critical strike chance, is useful in a power type build because you can perform a critical strike hit more often. But what about the condition? Is this a hybrid build? Well, not really. It's sort of a fancy glass cannon and you will see why. A true hybrid implies using a lot more conditions. So let's just leave it at that for a second and check our alternatives. We have toughness and critical strike damage, vitality, healing, wound duration, and virtue recharge rate. Honor and virtues are clearly not a choice for us if you want to go full offensive. You might go for toughness and critical strike damage. Critical strike damage is quite useful in a power type build, but you also have toughness. So with toughness, automatically we are no longer full offensive. You might think, oh, but toughness, it's only a bit of toughness, it's not a big deal. Well, the fact is that most of these traits, as you can see, meditation, healing, boon, allies heal, applying a boon to allies heals you, gain toughness when wielding a shield, healing power, gain precision based on your toughness, lose a condition at a certain interval of time, nearby allies gain toughness based on your level. A lot of support type traits that favor a bit more of a bunkerish type build or ally support, and we don't really want that in this particular build. So we are going to go full offensive and go for precision and condition damage. First trait, when activating Virtue of Justice, nearby foes are blinded, which is quite good, especially when you go in melee. I will tell you guys all about it in a few moments. Reduces the recharge rate of signets. Well, if you're going to use signets, some of you guys already noticed that I'm using signets, and I didn't talk about my utilities before the weapons for a particular reason, but we'll get to that later. I am using signets, and this makes them recharge fast. Virtue of Justice is renewed when you kill a foe. This is insane. This minor trait is insane. What do you mean it is recharged when you kill a foe? It's on a 30-second cooldown, gives a lot of burning and blindness, and you are going to tell me it recharges when I kill a foe? Well, if I kill it really fast, it recharges a lot. Well, apparently yes, even though it bugs a lot. So no one really knows, but this minor trait is insane. This and smite combined is what this build is all about. So, moving on, we have Radiant Fire. Reduce the recharge on torch skills. All burning durations are increased. So we have the burning that we will have anyway, and we have a lot more burning because every time we kill something, this refreshes. And if you activate it, you and your allies inflict burning on the next attack. But the fact that we went into Zeal and we have condition duration really amplifies the damage of our burning, and the fact that the burning now is increased by another 20%, that puts our burning duration at 50% without much effort. That's a lot on our Virtue of Justice combined with the Zealot Flame. You can almost keep something perma burn. Also, 20% increased recharge rate helps with Cleansing Flame and Zealot Flame, which is quite a good synergy. Moving on, we have Radiant Power. Deal more damage to foes inflicted with conditions. So now we do 10% more damage from Radiant Power, 10% more damage to burning foes, so that in total is 20% more damage, and another 10% more scepter damage, which is 30% more damage. It's starting to look like a glass cannon build, doesn't it? So last but not least, Right Hand Strength. Critical hit chance with one-handed weapons is increased by 50%. This trait alone can help us achieve something that not many classes are able to achieve. That something is 100% critical strike chance before Fury. And we have 10 more points left. The 10 more points can be placed in various locations, and once I get to the final notes I will tell you guys some customizations you can do to this build, but the standard mode should be 5-5. Gain Aegis when you are struck while below the health threshold. So basically you have Aegis every 40 seconds. You can use that to get an extra Aegis, and this is our third Aegis. This combined with 2 blinds should yield you quite a bit of survivability. So you have 3 Aegises and 2 blinds. The blinds are not really useful unless you're in melee range, but so far we know we will be fighting at range. And while you're fighting at range, most of the time you're vulnerable only to projectiles. And the fact that you have 3 Aegises really increases your chances of surviving. Also give us a bit of critical strike damage, which is never bad. Another nice thing is Vigorous Precision. Gain vigor when you deliver a critical hit. So now we can dodge a lot. And gain vigor when you deliver a critical hit. If I'm right and we have 100% critical strike chance, we will always deliver a critical hit. It has a duration of 5 seconds and it's on a 5-second cooldown. That means we will have Perma Vigor. So 3 Aegises, 2 blinds and Perma Vigor. It's quite a good start. So, moving on to utility. We see we do a lot of damage so far, everything points towards damage, and it's only natural to choose a skill that synergizes with the high amount of AoE damage we are going to do, because we have AoE burning, AoE damage, AoE skill, cleave, which is AoE, AoE skill, and AoE skill. AoE skill gives a lot of stacking damage, and the stacking damage works really well with the fact that 20% of all the damage you do is returned to you as healing. So if you do, let's say, 10,000 damage, then you get 2,000 health. If you do 10,000 damage on 3 enemies, then you get 6,000 health. So really useful healing skill. And now we move on to the rest of the slot skills. And you guys see that I'm choosing signets, and you might think why. The reason why I chose signets is because it complements the rest of the build quite well. You have Signet of Judgment. This is the most important signet. The signet passive reduces all incoming damage by 10%. So you have 3 IAGCs, 2 blinds, and reduce all incoming damage by 10%. Not to mention the fact that we will be fighting at range. So if we manage to do a lot of damage at range, that means this build is finally shaping up to do everything that I said it will. Not to mention, it breaks stun, does retaliation, and that's not really important. The weakness is important, and it's on a 24-second cooldown, which is not really bad. We have a few more signets, but you guys remember I said the build is quite vulnerable to condition type damage, and so far we have nothing that cleanses conditions, and I agree. So in certain fights that are abandoning condition damage, you can use inscribed removal. Using a signet cures the condition on you, it cures an entire stack. So that deals with the vulnerability towards condition type damage. The fact that it's on a 24-second cooldown, this one is on a 24-second cooldown, and this one is a 32-second cooldown. You have 3 conditional removals, which are around 30-second cooldowns. 25-second cooldown. The other signet is Bane Signet, improved power. Of course, we need power. The more power, the better. Knock down and damage your foe. Knock down for 2 seconds, the range of 1200. This is a quite good interrupter, and this synergizes well with the fact that we have Chains of Light, which is immobilize. So immobilize, knock down, and increase your condition damage, immobilize your target. Also at 1200 range, and immobilize is 4 seconds. So 4 seconds with 2 seconds and another 2 seconds. That's 6, 8. That combined is an 8-second CC that not only CCs but also gets you rid of condition. It synergizes really well. You don't really have to use signets if you don't want to, except Signet of Judgment. Even though the radiance straight line, as you can see, signet passive effects are improved. The radiance straight line is supposed to be played with signet. But regardless, instead of the Bane Signet and Signet of Wrath, you can use some support utilities if you want. No one is going to mind that much. I just find this particular way of playing the most optimal in the average scenario when you're going to play with pickup groups or with non-elitist group. Last but definitely not least, we have Tome of Wrath. Summon an ancient tome that grants you powerful offensive spell. So let's see now. Tome of Wrath. 20-second duration, 180-second cooldown, 1 second cast time. And has retaliation. Okay, fine. So we activate it, and we see that we have AoE damage plus burning, radius 240, range 1200. This hits 5 targets. Really nice. Send out a projectile that makes foe crippled and weak. Weakness and cripple, not that useful. Also huge range. Smiter's Boon. Send out of combat grants might and swiftness to allies. Might and swiftness and to allies. 10 seconds of 5 stacks of might. Also swiftness 5 seconds. Max number of allies 4. Also the range 1200. Zealot's Fervor, quickness for 5 seconds, fury for 10 seconds, max number of allies 5, also 1200 radius. 2 second casting time, 15-second cooldown, so you only get to use this once. So basically you can use this in combination with Conflagrate to do a lot of AoE bursting. And last we have Judgment, knock down and damage nearby foes with a massive blast. 3-second knockdown. So basically you can buff yourself, knock down the enemy, activate quickness and do burst AoE damage on 5 targets, which is quite a nice combo. Okay, moving on to the gear and stats. For the armor we have assassin stats, power, precision and critical strike damage. Assassin stats across the board. And as you can see, precision is higher than power, definitely assassin stat. I also put ruby orbs inside my armor, ruby orbs across the board. I find them quite useful and they're not expensive at all. Ruby orbs are just what I need, just the right amount of power, critical strike damage and precision to get me where I want to be. For the weapons, we have precision, power, critical strike damage, scepter, the assassin stats, and precision, power, critical strike damage, torch. I use superior sigil of accuracy in my scepter and superior sigil of perception in my torch. The second weapon set, the great sword, I use power, precision, critical strike damage. I don't need that much precision with my great sword, but I also put a superior sigil of accuracy just in case. Moving on to the accessories, I use ascended, power, precision, critical strike damage back piece, power, precision, critical strike damage earrings, power, precision, critical strike damage rings, and power, precision, critical strike damage necklace. So basically berserker stat across the board. So last piece of the puzzle would be the food, which is bowls of curry butternut squash soup. And you might want to use potions if you're fighting, let's say, undead, if you're fighting Citadel of Flame, if you're fighting Sons of Svani. Never forget about the potions, because they give you an extra 10% with another 10% against burning foes, with another 10% against targets with conditions, which is 20% basically, 30 with a potion, and another 10% on the scepter, which is basically 40% increased damage. You have 40% increased damage against mobs in general. So why did I use this particular stat combination? Well, if you take a look at my power, I'm around 3400 power. If you take a look at my condition damage, I'm around 774. As you can see, I invested nothing into condition damage, nothing at all, and I'm still at almost 800 condition damage. Why do we have condition damage? Well, you remember the burning that is always with us, and the AoE burning and all that stuff. The fact that the burning gives us the some of the 40% increased damage, and I use this condition damage to power up my burning that is on this build regardless of what I do. It's on every build regardless of what you do. That's the thing, the Guardian can't be the purest form of a glass cannon, as in without any conditions that do damage. I have 30 condition duration, which is used for vulnerability and burning, but I actually have 50% condition duration, which increases the burning duration substantially. So I have 4 seconds with another 5 seconds, that's 9 second burning. And the virtue of justice, we know that resets every time you kill a foe. So 5 seconds of burning is actually almost perma burning. It's situational. I won't say you have permanent burning, it's situational, especially when you're fighting bosses. But when you're fighting mobs, you have perma burn. The armor is 2177, almost 2200, but the fact that we get 10% less incoming damage and we have 3 Aegises and 2 blinds and stuff like that and perma vigor really makes up for the fact that you have around 12,000 HP, almost 12,000 HP. That's a really low HP, so you really need to stay at range. I also have 97 critical strike damage, so almost 100% critical strike damage. And last but not least, the pièce de résistance, one of the best achievements of this build stat-wise, is the fact that, as you can see, I don't have Fury on. I only have 25 stacks of accuracy from my sigil, and I'm at 85% critical strike chance. And you can go like, but Nemesis, you said you have 100% critical strike chance before Fury. You have 105 with Fury, and without Fury you only have 85. What's up with that? Well, as you can see on all of these skills, it says critical strike chance increased by 15%, which puts us at exactly 100% critical strike chance without Fury. And in the event, if you have Fury, you can use a different superior sigil of something here. It will put you under 80%, which will allow you to benefit from Fury on the Greatsword as well. That's why I went for Berserker stats and I didn't went for Assassin stats on the Greatsword. So like I promised, I have 100% critical strike chance at all times without Fury, and we will be fighting mostly at 1200 range, and the defense against that single target is 1 Aegis, 2nd Aegis, 3rd Aegis and Perma Vigor, not to mention 1 Immobilize and a 2nd Immobilize. So 2 Immobilizes, 3 Aegises and Perma Vigor, that's enough for range. That's actually quite enough, especially since some of these signets you can transform into projectile absorption. Not to mention you have 10% reduced all incoming damage, which is amazing, and you don't really have to go melee even when fighting AoE, because you have this at 1200 range. But when the aggro is taken by someone else and it's safe to go melee, you have Cleansing Flame, AoE burning all around, plus the smite. You can switch to Greatsword, put some symbols down, do some more blinding, and especially it stacks with some more blinding, pull them out for some knockdown, do some whirling wrath, and escape to the safety of range while continuing to do DPS, because this is on a really low cooldown. So basically the DPS uptime is maximum. So 100% critical strike chance at all times, almost 800 condition damage without investing into condition damage stat from gear at all, and 100% critical strike damage. That's what this gear combination is going to get you, and of course the extra 40% overall damage that you get from traits and the potion. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. You do so much damage, and you guys saw in the introduction that I went over 10k with some AoE hits, and you guys were like, whoa, that's awesome. Two things you need to keep in mind. The first is that I was with a bug group, not pre-made, no one was buffing me too much, just normal scenarios. Second thing, that 10k hit you can see, it's a 10k, but there are hits that actually do way more than that. More than 10k, and there's another very important piece of information that you guys will see soon enough that will make your jaw drop. So for that we are going to move to the math and statistics behind the build, and after we understand how each skill functions, there's going to be a lot there because a lot of the tooltips are wrong. After we understand how each skill functions, we can form a proper build rotation, and I'm going to demonstrate the build a little bit more with some footage and then the final notes, and we are done. And now we have finally reached the math and statistics behind this build. I tried to make the video as short as possible until this point, because now we are going to see the light. We are going to see what this build is actually capable of, and we are going to learn all the hidden aspects of the damage process. So in the beginning I mentioned something about tooltips and stuff like that. Some of you that have followed me for a while now know that when it comes to power type builds, you have to take into consideration the cooldown of the skill, the cast time, and the average damage. More or less. It doesn't matter if you do 10,000 damage with a skill if you can only cast it like once per minute and it's a channeling skill that takes like 10 seconds. Basically then you would do 1k for every second, because it's a 10k hit that is channeling for over 10 seconds, so 1k DPS and has a cooldown of a minute. That's not good. You have to take into consideration the attack speed. There is no damage meter in this game, and I don't think there will be anytime soon. So if you don't have an eye for these things to estimate a bit, and you don't have the experience to know what to look for, then it can be very easily misplaced. The common perception in Guild Wars 2 is that the bigger the number, the better. No, my friends, no. It's not only big numbers, it's also how fast, how often, and how many targets. That's really important as well. So we are going to take a look at the attack speeds of the auto attacks of a few weapons. Of course, the scepter, we are going to test the attack speed of the scepter, the greatsword, and the sword for a small comparison. It's going to make a point later on. And after the tests, I'm going to display everything on screen, and we'll move on to average damage. The Orb of Wrath has the casting time of 1/4. That's 0.25 seconds in the tooltip. Greatsword has 1/2, so basically 0.5 in the tooltip, and the sword has 1/2, and the last one doesn't have. Weird. Anyway, 0.5. So 0.25, 0.5, and 0.5 for the sword. Let's see if that is actually accurate, because we know from previous videos, I have explained when I made the glass cannon necromancer, this is the casting time. But there's also an animation delay between skills, and you have to take into consideration the animation delay as well in order to calculate an average DPS without a damage meter. So, let us begin. So as you can see, I'm hitting a practice dummy and I have a timer on. The benchmark is going to be 20 seconds, and at the end of the 20 seconds we will be drawing the conclusions. I'm not actually going to count the hits right now. I did that for myself with slow motion on, so I was sure that I didn't get anything wrong. So as you can see, the activation type tooltip wise was 1/2 aka 0.5 seconds. The testing benchmark was 20 seconds. The expected number of hits should have been 40 without the animation delay. We got 25 hits. That means the real value is 0.8 seconds. That's your attack speed with Greatsword 1. And with a bit of math, we presume the animation delay is 0.3. 0.3 animation delay for the auto attack of the Greatsword, which is pretty standard. Most animation delays in this game are 0.3. That's how it was for the Necromancer as well. So the actual value is 0.8. Okay, moving on. For the sword, the tooltip value was 1/2 aka 0.5 seconds, just like for the Greatsword. The testing benchmark is still 20 seconds. The expected number of hits was 40 without animation delay, and the actual number of hits was 25. The resulting real value is 0.8 seconds, which is your attack speed, and the presumed animation delay is 0.3, just like last time. I'm only doing sword just in case people wonder if you can use sword instead of scepter, so there is absolutely no confusion and I covered everything there is to cover. Now moving on to the scepter, the pièce de résistance, the weapon of all weapons, the, you know, good stuff. Although my hawk eye saw that something was amiss when firing with the scepter, I was really excited to do this test. I couldn't wait to see the results. I'm like, man, this weapon is so fast, and if you can get 100% critical strike chance, you will do amazing damage, especially with smite. Oh man, this is awesome. So the results are out. Activation time tooltip wise 1/4 aka 0.25 seconds. Testing benchmark 20 seconds. Expected number of hits without animation delay 80. Actual number of hits 26. Well, what? 26. 20 fucking 6. 26. Was that 26? Can you guys count and leave me in the comment below if I cannot count over 26? Resulting real value 0.7. It should have been 0.25. It's 0.769, which is a really nice number, 69. But that's not the point. The point is the presumed animation delay. I have no idea, and the tooltip is wrong. Either the tooltip is wrong, or some value is wrong, or it has a different animation delay. It's weird, has no, I don't know, it's weird. It's it should have been much faster. Honestly, it should have been much faster. The attack speed for the scepter should have been much faster. After I release this video, maybe some feedback will be offered towards this minor problem, and two things might happen. Either they will make the tooltip match the results, or make the results match the tooltip. If they make the results match the tooltip, this build will just have double, if not triple, just double. This build will have double the DPS for single target that it has now, and Guardian will be among top DPSers. If they match the tooltip with the results, then that's kind of a mistake a little bit, and they should find the middle ground. That's my opinion. But anyway, the point is there is a problem somewhere around here. and I just displayed it to you. So now we know that all three weapons, regardless of what the tooltip says, actually have the same attack speed. Oh man, I got you guys excited for nothing. But wait, there is more bad news with some more good news that makes some really good news, and moving on. So now that we know the attack speed of each individual weapon, it's time to see how much damage it can actually put out. We start with the scepter, of course, and we see that we do between 2000 and 2500 damage. Now, some people look at this and say, oh, you do a DPS of 2500. No, that is wrong. I look at this and say I do a real DPS of 3281, because over the duration of 4.46 seconds I did a total damage of 14,638. We did 6 hits. So with a little bit of math, that means that we did a DPS of 3281. It's not a DPS of 2500. This is the first step on the path to enlightenment. You can see that big numbers are not equal to your DPS. The high number value is not the same as the DPS. In the DPS value, you have to take into consideration the attack speed, the cooldown, and everything that I just said. Now it's just the demonstration part. So we are going to test this a bit more to get a small average, and then we are going to compare it to some other weapons, and then we are going to draw some very interesting conclusions. So let's see now, we are going to pew some more, and DPS of 3323, DPS of 4610 because the mob came to us, so he took the hits to the face faster. DPS 4096 because again the mob came to us. So now let's see what the greatsword can do. So we did 5 hits in approximately 3.53 seconds and we did a total damage of 14,251. The resulting real DPS is 4037 and it's kind of low. It's going to get a lot higher because those were some unlucky hits. So we are going to do some more testing, but it is obvious already. We know that the greatsword auto attacks have the same attack speed as the scepter auto attacks because the scepter is weird, and since the raw value is higher for the greatsword, that means that the greatsword DPS should be higher. The average greatsword auto attack DPS is higher than the scepter auto attack DPS. So before we draw any conclusions, indulge me in one more test. So for this test we are going to take a look at the scepter number 2 skill, which is called smite. Why are we doing this? You're going to find out soon enough, but first let's see what we know about the skill. According to the tooltip, it should attack 16 times. And no, it doesn't attack 16 times, and this is the third or fourth one of the numerous problems that the Guardian's tooltips has. But anyway, over a duration of 4 seconds it does 8 hits and the average damage is around 1212, resulting in a real DPS of 2424. Okay, a few more tests and we are going to find out something very interesting soon enough. You can tell that I'm enjoying myself greatly. But yeah, number of hits 8, pulsing duration 3.16, average damage 1245, resulting real DPS 3151. Another one would be smite, number of hits 9, pulsing duration 3.25, average damage 1111, resulting real DPS 3070. Okay. Smite, number of hits 10, pulsing duration 3.96, average damage 1127, resulting real DPS 2845. So as you can see, it spins around let's say a little under 3000, and the scepter 1 auto attack spins around over 3000. Both of them are under the greatsword auto attack, which is over 4000, which is clearly over 4000. So let's see what else we know about smite. Well, according to wiki, smite, strike foes in the target area repeatedly only 15 attacks, even though the tooltip in game says 16. Weird. Has a mathematical damage formula that implies weapon strength / armor. Good thing we have low armor. And under notes it says, cause a number of small fists to strike the target area. Each fist can only hit one target or not hit anything at all. Relative to the channel and recharge time, this is the most powerful single skill in the game if all hits connect. So this is the most powerful skill in the game and is RNG based, because not all hits kill. So tooltip wise, this is the most powerful skill in the game, but in reality it isn't, even though it should. That's the bad news. The good news is, and it should be here on the wiki, this skill is a pulsing type skill. What does that mean? Well, now, the fact that it's a pulsing type skill means that you can activate it and do some other stuff at the same time. So that means that you can use it at the same time as you use other skills. So that means it's not a competition between the Greatsword auto attack and the Scepter auto attack. It's actually a competition between the Greatsword auto attack and the Scepter auto attack plus smite combined. So this is why this skill is in the title. Not because it has the highest damage in the game, even though it should, but because it's a pulsing type skill. And you cannot do this sort of thing with any other weapon. You cannot use Whirling Wrath in combination with the Greatsword auto attack. The game doesn't work that way. And if you try to use Whirling Wrath to boost your Greatsword auto attack, at best you will only manage to not lower your DPS. Not to mention the fact that the cooldown is too high, you have to be in melee range. There's a lot of variables that don't really make single target DPS material out of the Greatsword AoE skills. No worries, they make up for it in AoE. That's why they are AoE skills, to do AoE damage. So the moment of truth, the moment we all been waiting for. I've been waiting for this moment for well over a week now, since I started making this guide. The difference between the Greatsword auto attack and the Scepter 1 auto attack combined with smite. So as expected, the Greatsword performs worse for single target. I'm only going to post the difference time-wise because it's the easiest one to follow. Basically, how fast can you kill something? There's like no discussion there, no argument, no further need of proof. I can rest my case. So, do you guys realize what this means? Do you guys realize what this means? So let us take a moment and appreciate some of the following facts. It has been said that the Guardian has no range weapon. Wrong. It has been said that the Guardian cannot do DPS, especially single target DPS. Wrong. It has been said that no Guardian build can play without offering some form of support to your team. Wrong. It has been said that the Guardian is too squishy when going full Berserker, and that makes it underpowered. It's not on par with the other classes. Wrong. Because of the fact that at range you do more DPS than in melee for single target, that means that you're not too squishy. You're just as squishy as you have to be. Because the way the Guardian is built, if you had more HP, in other builds you would become overpowered. So the overall health of the Guardian is lower, and for single target glass cannon builds, you have extended range and more damage than in melee. So now you guys can see how everything makes sense. Every time I make one of these builds for a new class or for the same class, I just pause for a moment. It's really surprising how well this build system is made. I want to pay my respects to whoever made this, because that man is a genius. So why do we have the Greatsword then? Well, for the AoE of course. Zealot Flame and Cleansing Flame do have the range advantage and lower cooldown than Symbol of Wrath and Whirling Wrath, but they hit lower. So it doesn't really require too much of a demonstration or numbers or anything. You can actually see that Symbol of Wrath and Whirling Wrath combined overkill a monster, whereas the Zealot Flame and Cleansing Flame can't actually manage to kill it. That means that there is absolutely no discussion when it comes to AoE potential. So what are we going to do then? Well, we are going to use everything then for AoE. But that is for when we get to the damage rotation and playstyle. But first let's take a look at some fast calculations regarding burning, because I kind of left that behind. So when I did the calculations for the maths and statistics, you saw that I wrote without burning. I didn't put in the calculation the burning value. So let's see what we know so far about burning in this build. Well, first of all, we have burning regardless of what we do on all the Guardian builds, and I have proved that. Secondly, I said that we have perma burning in this particular build, and I'm going to prove that once we get to the demonstration of the overall build's capabilities. The third thing would be that we have a condition damage of 774 without investing in condition damage at all. Fourth thing would be that we have 50% burning duration, as in 30% condition duration plus an extra 20% from the traits, which is exactly the amount we need to keep perma burning up using Virtue of Justice and Zealot Flame into Zealot Fire, or just Zealot Flame. So if you take a look at the condition damage calculator, we can see that without investing anything into condition damage stat-wise from the gear, our burning tick has went up from 328 to 523. So not nearly double, but if you think about it, we invested nothing into condition damage from the gear. Everything is full glass cannon from the gear. So the fact that we almost doubled our burning, which is always there regardless of the build, and we did that by going into a trait line that actually increases our direct type damage with damage modifiers as long as we have burning on the target, and we have burning because we have perma burning. You guys see how everything ties up? You see how this build actually squeezes every last drop of DPS possible and puts it into this beautiful optimized synergy. There's no need to go further with condition damage because of the condition damage formula, and there is such a thing as too much, but it's never too much if you don't invest anything into it from the gear. You only get the condition damage, you only boost your burning by going to a trait line that actually increases your direct type damage with modifiers if you have burning, which is permanent and increased, and I can go on forever like this. But you guys understand the point. So moving on to the damage rotation and playstyle. So when it comes to the damage rotation and playstyle for the Guardian, we can split this chapter into single target DPS rotation and AoE DPS rotation. For single target, as you can see, it's quite simple. Basically, you start with Virtue of Justice plus Zealot Flame into Zealot Fire to stack the burning. Then you do Chains of Light, which is optional, depending if the target is going to move or not. And then you do Smite plus Orb of Wrath spam. As you can see, this is the initial rotation, and then you are supposed to use all of these skills as soon as they refresh their internal cooldown. For AoE, it's just a little bit more complicated. Basically, you start with Virtue of Justice plus Zealot Flame to stack up the burning. Then you do Cleansing Flame plus Smite, which is optional. Then you switch weapon, and under the cover of Litany of Fury, which should be instant cast. It's a meditation skill, should be instant cast. It's not, it's another problem with tooltips or whatever it is. But don't let that get you down. Eventually it might be instant cast and it's going to benefit this build greatly. Then you do Leap of Faith, which again is optional, plus Symbol of Wrath into Binding Blades Pool, again optional, plus Whirling Wrath for the grand AoE. Then you do some auto attacks until you can switch weapon, and then you repeat sequence because you are back where you started. One thing to note is that because of your high AoE damage, and you might not be alone, targets will die a lot around you, which will refresh the Virtue of Justice, which makes it spammable. So that's about it. So demonstration of the overall build's capabilities. I just want to show you guys the perma burn. Because of the fact we have 50% burning duration and a lot of condition damage without investing in any of these from the gear, whenever we use Virtue of Justice, because it gives burning to the entire team, together you manage to stack over 30 seconds. So either the target dies when fighting AoE, so the Virtue of Justice refreshes instantly so you can keep adding burning and burning and burning, or for a single target you are able to stack over 30 seconds, and it has a 30-second cooldown, Virtue of Justice, which means that you can use it as soon as it expires. So voila, perma burn. Just going to show you a few more cases in which being at range actually is more beneficial than being in melee in general, not to mention the fact that you have higher DPS uptime, low risk, and in the Guardian's case you actually do more single target DPS at range. Okay, so before I end this video I just want to show you guys some customizations. So final notes. So like I promised, in the final notes I will talk a little bit about customizations. So for example, we know that so far we have damage modifier value of 10, 20, 30%. With the potion we can get to 40%. Let's assume that you want even more damage than that. So all you have to do, since we know we will be fighting at range and we do more DPS on single target at range than in melee, we can go into virtues and choose Unscathed Contender, which is a damage modifier of another 20, so that would put us at 60%. And if you want to increase that even more, you go to Superior Rune of the Scholar, which is another 10%, while your health is about 90%. And since you're fighting at 1200 range, your health will probably be over 90%, and if it's not, your team is already dead, probably. So that puts you at a damage modifier of 70%. Let's assume you don't want more damage, you want more support or something like that, because Guardian is known to have support. You can quickly switch Bane Signet or Signet of Wrath, even Signet of Judgment for some support, some Sanctuary, some protection, some whatever you want, Wall of Reflection, anything you want, just go wild. You can even switch the torch when you're fighting a single target boss that is quite hard to beat. You can switch it for the focus, and you have blindness and block and stuff like that, which might do you really well, especially if you're going for the Unscathed Contender. And the Superior Rune of the Scholar will keep you over 90% health, safe DPS uptime maximum, stuff like that. So let's say that you generally are in a pre-made group that has Fury and banners and everything that you need. You can go lower in precision and get more health if you want more health, or get more power if you want more power, or maybe switch some of the accessories or gear to add a bit more vitality. You can easily get to 15k while still doing not nearly that much DPS, but you might be able to get to 15k health and still do the same DPS as long as you have Perma Fury. If you're running in a pre-made group with Perma Fury, you might be able to drop 20% critical strike chance to get an extra 3k or something like that, or like I said, go wild, go to 70% damage modifiers, increase your power, increase your crit damage, everything you want, just play the way you want it. You know, you basically get the idea. So this was the DPS Guardian from my point of view. It's finally finished. I'm really proud of how it turned out. I worked really hard on it and I experienced some really unpleasant and unforeseen technical difficulties, and I managed to overcome them. I think I'm going to make a video how I overcome those technical difficulties, some editing problems, and it's a long story, doesn't matter. So this is my masterpiece. I almost didn't want to post it after everything that has happened, but now I've done it, it's done, now it belongs to you guys. If you guys have any questions, any feedback, as always leave them in the comment section below and I will answer them eventually. Facebook, this should be Facebook. I'm going to start using Facebook more often. There are a lot of times when I have to make a small announcement and there's nowhere to do it, and I just write something on my latest video, but not many people check that. Facebook is more accessible. A lot of people apparently use Facebook, so I will communicate to you guys through Facebook. The live stream, I sometimes stream depending on how much time I have, my mood, the games that I play at the moment, stuff like that. If you guys know any talented visual or audio artists that would be interested in collaborating with me for a long-term project, don't hesitate to let me know. I successfully made a DPS Guardian that makes perfect sense, squeezed all the DPS possible out of it, has maximum DPS uptime, maximum range, really high single target DPS, almost as good as the other classes, and it would be as good as any other class if Orb of Wrath's tooltip would be correct, or just a little bit better, closer to what the tooltip actually is. Great AoE, great everything, just yeah. So my next video is going to be top 10 things that Guild Wars 2 needs to implement. I have them right here, saved them for a long time, and I make these videos so I can safely make the tank Guardian build. I already made the build, I just have to record for it without some minor modifications. Even though the Guardian tank build will be really great, a lot of people will go like, tank build, we don't need that, we just want DPS, DPS, DPS. And it's wrong, and I'm going to make some really valid points with my next video, and after I make that, I'm just going to make the Guardian tank build and go, you should use a tank build and the game should change. This is why I already said why. Make it happen or you lose a lot of people eventually. I hope you guys will enjoy the video as much as I enjoyed making it. There were some moments where I was frustrated with this, but I pulled through and now it is done. I hope you guys will enjoy it. But until next time, enjoy your gaming and have a great day.